So, what exactly happens when a local government's massive, multi-million dollar ambition crashes headfirst into its own internal reality? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating case study out of Manistee, Michigan. It perfectly captures that incredible tension between the shiny official story a city tells the public and the absolute crucial need for hard, verified data. Because as you're going to see, expanding public safety gets incredibly complicated and pretty messy when the numbers just don't seem to line up.
Okay, let's dive into this. $3.4 million. That's the financial stake on the table for a proposed initiative they called the Manistee Fire and EMS Response Authority, or MFERA for short. Now, in the world of local government, asking taxpayers to foot the bill for a brand new multi-million dollar authority, that is a monumental shift. We aren't just talking about tweaking a budget line item here. We're talking about a permanent restructuring of how public safety is funded and delivered to the community. And obviously, whenever you've got a price tag that big, it absolutely demands some rigorous justification. To really ground this story in Manistee, we need to look at the city leadership's public pitch, which honestly sounded pretty compelling. Their argument was that replacing a currently free professional EMS service for the surrounding townships with a new unified regional fire and EMS district was just a smart, collaborative, and highly efficient expansion. The whole narrative was incredibly optimistic, pooling resources to build this robust, modernized emergency response system. To any casual observer, it just sounds like textbook, forward-thinking municipal planning. Now, what's really interesting about this is the core friction it created. On one hand, you have the city's very public narrative, heavily leaning into buzzwords like budgetary efficiency, strategic framework, and tightly controlled operations. But on the exact opposite side, internal documentation started to surface, alleging severe mismanagement and systemic operational failures that were completely hidden from the public eye. The timeline here is what really makes this whole thing wild. Right while city leadership was spending the year pushing hard to fund this regional expansion and essentially raise township expenses, a highly detailed warning came out of nowhere from inside the public safety community itself. An internal whistleblower stepped up with formal documentation claiming that actually, the core city operation wasn't expanding efficiently at all. It was practically imploding from the inside out. To really grasp the gravity of these claims, we have to talk about who is making them. John A. Dodson is not just some random critic. The guy brings formidable credentials to the table: 39 years of public safety experience, 32 years as a licensed paramedic, and 12 years as an executive fire chief. On top of that, he's a state-licensed instructor and the lead investigator for a consulting firm called Operational Integrity Advisors. So this isn't just a casual complaint. This is a meticulously documented warning from an industry expert whose literal job is to audit municipal departments. Dodson didn't mince words either. He went right after the foundational logic of the expansion, saying, and I quote, "The push for a district-wide expansion was being engineered at the exact same time the core city operation was imploding from within." Just think about the sheer weight of that allegation. He's essentially arguing that you cannot build a massive new regional authority when your own home base is fundamentally unstable. It's like trying to build a mansion on a crumbling foundation. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what Dodson laid out in his formal technical deficiency audit. This wasn't just a memo, it was a blaring alarm bell for stakeholders, township boards, and city council members. He warned them about ongoing fines, regulatory legal actions, and hidden liability risks that were allegedly being glossed over by the city's happy narrative of efficiency. His goal was clear: strip away the persuasive PR talk and force the conversation to be strictly about actuarial reality and hard data. But get this, here is a surprising little fact that perfectly highlights how incredibly difficult it can be just to get that hard data. Dodson mentioned that when he filed a standard Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, request just to get a fraction of the data he needed to double-check the city's claims, he was hit with an estimated fee of $297. To avoid paying it, he actually had to rely entirely on the administration's own publicly available numbers to try and expose the holes in their proposal. It's a pretty striking example of the everyday hurdle citizens face when demanding local transparency. So the crucial point is really the tangible, severe drop in fire department personnel that this audit exposed. The city started the year with 8 employees in the department, and that number plummeted to just 5. I mean, think about that. In a literal life-or-death field like emergency medical services and fire response, losing nearly 40% of your core staff in a single year, that is a massive, incredibly dangerous operational challenge. So how exactly do the two sides explain this massive drop in staff? Well, publicly, the city defended the reductions as just controlled attrition, basically saying they were choosing not to fill open positions to navigate a tight budget and save some cash. Dodson, however, called that out completely. His audit claimed this loss of personnel was absolutely not some strategic budgetary choice. He argued it was the direct result of a toxic, unstable working environment that was forcing resignations and terminations. As you might guess, all of this behind-the-scenes tension couldn't stay hidden forever. Let's fast forward and take a look at the transcript from the May 6th, 2026 Manistee City Council meeting. This is the exact moment where the budget squeeze, the lack of transparent data, and these completely opposing narratives dramatically collided right out in the open. When you read through the meeting records, the internal frustration among the council is just palpable. One council member actually went on the record and stated, "Decisions get based on emotions rather than data." And that quote hits the nail on the head. It's the exact trap Dodson warned about in his audit. When a municipality is making massive decisions about public safety and tossing around millions of tax dollars without a verifiable set of agreed-upon facts, emotion completely takes the wheel. Building on that frustration, we get another absolutely wild admission from the council floor. One member practically begs for some structural oversight, pointing out that sure, the city has an ordinance committee, they've got a parks committee, but, and I quote, "We don't have a finance committee, and that's really the crux of the city." Remember, the fire department budget alone is roughly $1.4 million. The idea that a budget of that size isn't being scrutinized by a dedicated financial subcommittee, that reveals a pretty shocking gap in fiduciary oversight. And the council's own admissions just keep validating that underlying friction. Another member actually called out the dangers of their own communication strategy regarding the fire district. They warned, if you give them false or guess information, all you're going to do is create chaos and more angst amongst the public. They flat out acknowledged that relying on outdated data, like a year-old white paper, was making it completely impossible to effectively communicate with taxpayers who were, rightfully asking the hard questions. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this total lack of clarity led to a really messy internal debate during that exact same meeting. The council tried to untangle this whole attrition issue. They talked about how the general fund was incredibly pinched, which was made worse by a surprise $114,000 hit from an EMS obligation and state revenue rollbacks. They confirmed they chose not to fill vacant positions because of the money. But then there was this visible confusion on the floor as members literally debated whether firefighters were fired because of the budget or if they resigned. They eventually clarified that nobody was laid off, but the exact reason for the massive staffing bleed remained an incredibly sensitive topic. When we synthesize all of this, we really arrive at a fundamental philosophical clash. The city is holding fast to its ambition to create a permanent, unified regional service to expand its reach. But the opposing viewpoint issues a really stark warning. Taxpayers should absolutely not be funding the expansion of a department that hasn't even proven it can master the basic administrative, clinical, and proactive requirements of its current, smaller jurisdiction. So ultimately, why does all of this matter to you? Well, it's the universal taxpayer's dilemma. Whether you're living in Manistee or literally anywhere else, your local government is running on your property taxes and your insurance premiums. When a city asks to shift millions of your dollars around, demanding verifiable operational integrity, which just means proving that the money translates directly into sound, legally defensible, and safe practices, that isn't just a good idea, it is your absolute right as a stakeholder. Which brings us to our final thought today. Imagine your own local city council or township board came to you and asked you to approve a $3.4 million restructuring of your emergency services. What hard data would you demand to see before signing off? Would you just take the official PR narrative at face value, or would you be the one asking for the technical audit? It's a vital question for any engaged citizen to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions in your own communities, and I'll see you next time.